Hey everybody, how's it going? My name is Skip McDonald, and we're here for another video. I just want to keep trying to share things that helped me get through my grieving process, which lasted way too long in my life. And I'm going to play a clip for you here today. The very first video I caught on near-death experiences, and they had a huge impact on my mindset. And it was that and meditation being the biggest thing that would help anybody. But those are the two tools that really got me on track and finally dealt with my grief in a positive manner. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and play the video, and hopefully you guys find it as helpful as I did. It's a surgeon that was struck by lightning, and like I said, I'll let him tell the story. And here we go.
In 1994, my wife had 5 people with birthdays in the month of August. So every year we would have a communal birthday party. And they had picked a place called Sleepy Hollow Lake. At the lake, there were pavilions that you could rent. And she rented one that would hold 25 plus people. And that was going to be our August get-together. I was given the job of running the barbecue, so I was outside getting the food ready, and most everybody else was upstairs in the pavilion. And at the beginning of the day, it was beautiful outside. The sun was shining, it was a pleasant temperature, and everything seemed good. At some point, I had decided I should call my mom to check on her because she was not going to be there. By this time, my dad had already passed, so my mom was there by herself. And I wanted to check on her, so I got somebody to cover the barbecue, and I walked around the front of the building where there was a payphone attached. What I hadn't realized was that a storm cloud had blown up over the lake, and so we're right next to the lake. So I walk over and I'm going to call my mom, and I put in the code in the phone, and I'm trying to get her on the payphone, and I let it ring 5, 6, 7 times, and she didn't pick up. So I thought, all right, she's busy. I'll try her again later. And as I started to take the phone away from my face to hang it up, I heard a huge crack. And this big flash of light came out of the phone and hit me right in the face and just threw me back like a rag doll. And as it threw me back, I had the strangest sensation of moving forward. And I remember standing there going, this doesn't make any sense. I know I saw the lightning. I knew I'd been hit, and I knew I'd been thrown backwards. But now I'm standing here and nothing's making sense. And I look at the phone, and the phone's dangling. And I'm just standing there, just absolutely bewildered. And at that point, I hear my mother-in-law screaming, and she's at the top of the stairs. I'm at the bottom of the stairs. And she starts running down the stairs, headed right at me. And I thought, this can't be good when your mother-in-law's running at you, screaming. Something's bad. As she got down in front of me, she was looking off to her left, and I thought, this is really strange, and it's like I wasn't even there. And I'm like, what the hell? And I turned to go where she's going, and I took about 3 steps, and I run into myself on the ground. And I'm like, oh shit, I'm dead. And it was such a shock. I fully expected that when you died, there would be some sort of something would happen to tell you, bells, whistles, who knows what. But there would be some sort of a signal that, hey, buddy, you're dead. But there wasn't. It was just a very natural progression of, I was in this state this second, and the next second I was someplace else. I went from being in a physical form to being in a spiritual form. There was a lady who was waiting to use the phone. She gets down to start doing CPR. Turns out she's a nurse. And I'm standing there and I'm trying to call out to anybody who will listen. And I don't see, I can see all of them, I can hear all of them, but nobody can see or hear me. And then it occurred to me that I'm standing here and I'm thinking exactly the way I normally would. I have complete control of my mind, and I'm thinking in the vernacular in the way that I normally would think. And I'm having these massive racing thoughts are going through my head trying to make sense of this whole thing. But I realized at that moment that whoever I am, I always am. And there's no such thing as death. And, my spirit, or whoever I was, is eternal. And that was probably the first big thing, realization that came to me as this whole thing unfolded, was that my spirit is here forever. So we're essentially two people. We're in this body, which is nothing more than a costume, over the top of who we are always, and in our spirit form. And when I went up to the body and I looked at it, and it seemed to be very dispassionate about it. It was like, that's me, but it's not. I'm me. I'm still who I always was, and that's nothing but an empty shell. And that was pretty earth-shaking. It was not a frightening experience. It was, it was just very matter-of-factly, this is the way things really are. And then I thought, well, there's no point in standing here because nobody can see me or hear me. And I turned around and I start to walk toward the stairs, and I'm going to go up the stairs and check on my family. And I started up the stairs and I got to about the third step, and I'm looking down at the ground, and I start to see my legs dissolve. And I thought, well, okay, this is getting really weird. And as I got to the top of the stairs, I had lost all form. I was just a ball of energy. The stairs, when you get to the top of the first level, it goes up another few steps to the left. And I didn't bother with that. I had no form. I just went through the wall. And when I came out on the other side of the wall, I came out right over the top of my wife, who was sitting painting children's faces. And I remember taking a picture in my head of who was there, what kids were there, how the furniture was arranged, and what order the kids were standing in. And that became an important issue later on when we were comparing notes, and I was able to say all of these things that verified the fact that, yeah, I did see it, and I was there. I continued going through that room, and when I got out of the room and went through the roof, and that's when things really got interesting, it was like I had suddenly fallen into a river of pure, positive energy. There was a bluish-white light that this energy emanated from. If you could imagine an energy that's completely composed of love and peace, there were no other emotions, no other senses that I had except that. And it was just earth-shaking to feel that much love and peace coming from this source. And it came to me that this must be the God energy. This is what makes everything. And I thought, this is the greatest thing that could ever happen to somebody, to to have this realization and to have this feeling. And that's the only time I've ever experienced anything like that and in my whole life. At that point, I realized that I was going someplace. I started to see a collage of high points and low points in my life. It was just, there wasn't a lot of explanation or thought. It was just, there's pictures of different things in my life. High points, low points, trauma, whatever it was. And at that point, I was just kind of settling into flowing in the stream. I didn't know where it was going or where it was taking me, but it was exciting. And it was an ecstasy. It was such a wonderful feeling. And then all of a sudden, it's like somebody flipped a switch. Suddenly I was in pain. And I was back in my body, calling out loud in my head to whoever would listen that, please don't make me do this. I don't want to go back. And I had 3 kids and a wife, and I loved my life. But there was no comparison to what I was experiencing outside my body. I was like, please don't make me do this. I was really angry. I wanted to stay where I was, because I went from absolute bliss to absolute pain. I mean, where this thing hit me in the face and where it came out my foot with like 2 hot pokers. But I realized that, it's not my choice. And so the lady who was doing CPR had stopped, and she was kneeling next to me. And it took several minutes before I was conscious to be able to open my eyes. And when I opened my eyes, everything was really out of focus. And I wanted to say something to thank her, and unfortunately what came out was, I'm a doctor, it's okay. Like, what a stupid thing to say. And so I realized at that point that, okay, you're not thinking very clearly, just shut up and just wait this out. Of course, everybody starts running over, and they call an ambulance and they call the police. And I thought, I don't want to go sit in the emergency room for 4 to 6 hours to have somebody tell me I'm alive. So I opted to just have them take me home, and I called my cardiologist friends and my neurologist.
Okay, I'm going to stop it right there. If you guys want to check out the rest of that video, it's really interesting. That guy's name, let me see if I can pull up his name. Tony Sikoria. Thank him so much for sharing his story, because, man, it just kind of jolted me. And so I just went down that rabbit hole of checking out even more of them. And I'll share more videos down the road. But, the big takeaway from that for me was the fact that it was painless. It was all natural feeling. He was surrounded by love and divine light, and he didn't want to come back. And so after watching a bunch of those videos over the last couple years, I found that a lot of them say that same thing, and most of them don't want to come back. I mean, they're just surrounded by so much love. It's like he said, it was like ecstasy. So, hopefully you guys found that as helpful as I did. It like I said, for me it was life changing, and it just started me down that whole rabbit hole. And as we go, I'll go through and find some more spots. Maybe not such a long clip. I know that one was kind of long, and maybe find some things that really hit home with me, because there's a bunch of them. Trust me. and they're all from all different walks of life, different ways of passing away, and all that. But all of them pretty much say that same thing, and that's the thing. We're all scared to die. That's the biggest reason why we grieve so hard. We think that they're gone, and they're in a. They always say they went to a better place, and I never did buy that when I was a kid, and after my dad passed and everything. I think, man, no way you're going to convince me of that. But that's absolutely true. That's actually what happens. Once I started going down this rabbit hole, it took me from. I always believed in God. I always believed that Jesus died for our sins. And I called myself a believer, but now I'm a knower. It flipped a switch for me. And like I said, this video single-handedly didn't do it, but after I watched enough of them in a row, and between that and meditation, it definitely changed my whole mindset. And I know that there's a God, and I know that our spirit goes on, and it is a better place. It's surrounded by nothing but love. All this other garbage that goes on in the world is irrelevant. The whole left versus right, Republican, Democrat, all that is just garbage. It has nothing to do with what's real. So, rather than get caught up in all that, I just kind of started meditating on stuff and going down those roads. The more people I talk to about it, the more I realize, because I couldn't even talk about it for years, but the more I do, the more I realize that we all share the same thoughts, even though we don't say it. It's like it's real. They say there's 5 stages of grief, and I've got them written here. It says denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. I don't know how true any of that is. I don't give that much thought, because then they say it doesn't happen like in sequence. You don't go through denial first and then anger, and that's not the way it works. And for me, it was over a 40-year period of me dealing with all this. But one thing I will say that we all tend to do is after we lose somebody, we keep it bottled up, and you have to do it on your own timeline, but eventually you really need to talk about it. That's the biggest thing that helps, really. And for me, and I've like I said, I've talked to a bunch of people, and it seems like we all push people away. I remember thinking when my first grandchild was born, I don't want to get too close to this baby, because it's eventually I'm going to pass away, and I don't want to hurt him. I don't want him to feel that pain that I felt growing up. Man, are you kidding me? There's no way you're going to pass up knowing who your grandkids are. That is just insane. Now looking back on it, but that was the truth. That's the way I felt, And I don't know. It like I said, there's that, and let's see what else I've got here. Don't want to talk about it for sure. Can't go to a funeral. Man, that was a big one for me for a long time. I couldn't go to a funeral. I could go to a complete stranger's funeral and just totally lose it, man. I couldn't keep my act together. I always envied people that could do that, just be stoic and not cry. And man, that wasn't me. I was a blubbering idiot every time I went to one, which to each his own. I mean, and that's part of it, is because I had so much scarring going on, And then the last thing I can think of really that we all share is so if you have a parent that passes away, especially, I guess, the age that they were, for some reason we get it in our heads that, well, that's how long I'm going to live. Man, that has nothing to do with it. But it's there. It must be human nature, because like I said, a lot of people tell me the same story. It's just nuts. Really is nuts. But like I said, hopefully you guys find that video as helpful as I did. Let me know in the chat if I'm barking up the wrong tree, or if that's helpful or not. If there's something else you'd want to talk about, let me know. But that's kind of what gave me my breakthrough. You know, and then the other thing, like I said, is meditation. I'd say meditation is more important than any of it, because that's really where you get in touch with that inner being. So it was something I'd like to offer to anybody that's interested. A guided meditation, a private guided meditation. I can help you do the things that I do. You know, they sure seem to help. You know, what's crazy is we all have the answers if you just be quiet long enough and listen to yourself. Just kill all the thoughts that are going on in your mind. Your instincts will take over. And I unknowingly started doing things to meditate that now, looking at all the instructions on how to meditate, I've watched a bunch of them since then, and I was already doing them. You know, so just by, I don't know, sheer luck or whatever, I don't know, but divine guidance, you can call it what you want. But I just started doing all these meditation rituals, and I've explored a bunch of them, and some of them work really well, some of them don't work the greatest. You know, like I've got candles here. You know, I do a candle meditation that helps me. You know, it's one of the easiest ways I find to get into that state. You kind of have to get into a different state or whatever mentally. But like I said, if anybody's interested in that, we could do a Zoom call type thing, and I'll walk you through some guided meditations and help you deal with it. Or if you just want to do a Zoom call and talk, man, I'm good with that too. Just let me know. And so that's going to be it for today. Next video I think I'm going to address some different issues, maybe some current events. But they all come back down to this whole process of grieving. You know, the whole thing with Charlie Kirk went on, and all the craziness that's revolving around that, the craziness going on in our world. You know, I would like to address some of those things. So I'm going to go ahead and sign off for now, and hopefully you guys find this video helpful. Like I said, if you do and you think somebody's going through a rough time and needs to hear it, please share it with them. Thanks, guys.